Good morning from San Francisco, California. This is JP Collins with Book of Hours, and I'm at the Embarcadero basically, and behind me is the ferry building. And today I'm going to talk to you about climate change, but yeah, I've already futzed the intro. So anyway, today I'm going to call this podcast Carrot, and the reason I'm calling it Carrot is because we've been given something that's been dangled in front of our eyes for years, for decades, and that very thing is called climate change. And the other day, I was watching Lionel Nation, and he brought some things to my attention that I'd never really thought about. I mean, I dealt with climate deniers, and I've dealt with the accusations of people who are climate change proponents and people who advocate for sequestering carbon and all these things to stop global warming as a religion. And I kind of took exception with that. I mean, okay, I've heard it a few times, and I actually, I took up, or I started thinking about that. And I kind of agree with him. I think that a lot of people do treat it like a religion, and I have as well. So that said, I started rethinking my position on global warming and carbon especially, and the cause of global warming. A lot of people like Lionel was saying, he doesn't believe that necessarily that it's human caused by, say, carbon emissions. That's where I take exception. I mean, I believe that the warming that's been going on is truly human caused, and that carbon has a lot to do with it, as well as other so-called greenhouse gases such as methane, which is really pretty nasty. It stays in the atmosphere a shorter amount of time, but it has a lot more impact on trapping heat into the atmosphere. So as I was thinking about it, I realized that I was buying into a lot of the bullshit that a lot of other people have been buying into for years. And looking back, I started thinking about this and questioning my own belief system, and really kind of sifting through it. And this has been a couple days, and I finally came to this conclusion that basically I still believe that this is true. I still believe that carbon is really at fault here, and that the industries and automobiles and factories and everything that we've been spewing into the atmosphere for the last 150 to 200 years since the Industrial Revolution have really done a lot of damage to our environment, to the point to where we're almost people are talking about having just a few more, less than a decade left to live. So I wanted to question some of those issues, and I thought about it, and I came to the same conclusion that I came to before, and that is that I really believe that we're at fault, and that we're basically killing ourselves slowly. That said, this situation, this issue has been around for a very long time. In fact, it's been around a lot longer than a lot of people think. We in America, we have this very short memory. We don't remember a lot of things, especially in the short-term historical record. Americans, I like to say Americans like the idea of history. Okay, so we like the Disneyfied version of history. We like the Cliff Notes, and even like the fake version of history. And really, well, I forget who said it, but maybe Tolstoy said something like, history is a great thing as long as it were true. I think that's correct. But anyway, different sides of the political spectrum like to quote Thomas Jefferson. Okay, so people take things from history that they like, and they use it to their advantage. But let's look back. Let's start with Ronald Reagan. Well, let's start with Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter, he wasn't talking about greenhouse gases. He was talking though about energy consumption and trying to conserve energy. And there's something to be said for that. That's always the quote unquote low-hanging fruit as far as green technologies and preventing pollution, use less energy. Okay, good. So he put solar water heaters on the White House roof. Okay, so the first thing Ronald Reagan did was to take them off the roof. as well as to then turn our environmental policy and our energy policy into a military policy. And he bumped up the military and made sure that, American military was going to protect our oil interests around the world. From there, we had, Mr. George H.W. Bush, who basically ran his campaign as he said he would be the environmental president. And he talked about, at the time, the term was greenhouse effect. He talked about the greenhouse effect, he talked about greenhouse gases, he talked about all that stuff. And the reason I bring this up, before I say that, he promptly forgot that he actually ran on that, which is no real surprise, right? I mean, what president, really does what they say they're going to do, except, in the interest of their corporate overlords? Okay, so anything for the people does not get taken care of, but anything for the corporate overlords, that gets taken care of right away. So the reason I bring this up is because this has been going on for a long time, obviously, and he ran on this, and he got people to vote for it, and vote for him. He went against a Democrat. The Democrats apparently, they were, environmentalism was part of their deal, but yet, he went against Dukakis and won on, one of many points, but that was one of many, and promptly forgot about it and was roundly criticized. In fact, Europe, the European allies were hollering and screaming that, America needs to pay attention to this thing, and they need to start, reducing carbon emissions. The reason I bring it up is because, politicians always say these things, we fall for it, and then they go back on their word, and especially when it has to do with the environment, okay? His excuse from at least his administration's excuse was, it's going to be bad for American business if we do this. Well, that's the old crank. That's always the excuse. It's the excuse against raising the minimum wage. It's the excuse for making insurance universal and single payer. It's the excuse for you name it. It's out there. Okay, so it's all in the interest of the corporate overlords. So, going back on your word when it comes to environmental policy is par for the course, and yet it's always used as this carrot dangled in front of us to, have us say, oh, he's for that. Let's vote for that person, okay? So then we get to the Clinton administration, and they did jack shit about it. In fact, if anything, during the Clinton administration, we had a bigger increase of SUVs. Being purchased. We had more oil being protected and put out there in the atmosphere. More people driving. More people ignoring this very issue. And here you have Al Gore, who and I'll get to him in a second. Al Gore is vice president, who apparently is this is his big thing, climate change, but did absolutely nothing as the vice president. Now I hear you saying, but the vice president doesn't have a lot of power, and you're correct in that. However, it was unprecedented what Al Gore did when he became vice president, and that is he negotiated a deal with Clinton to make his office of the vice presidency a lot more effective than any vice president had ever been before. So for Al Gore to say that he did these things in the White House, or he tried to get things passed. I mean, Hillary Clinton said, I tried to do, whatever. The road to hell is paved with great intentions, good intentions. And even as a senator, okay, so here's Al Gore. So as a senator in the 80s, so let me go back. We've been talking about global warming, climate change, greenhouse effect. We've been talking about all this since, the mid 80s, if not sooner. So this has been an issue for over 30 years, and yet people are treating it like it's a new goddamn thing. And it's not. It's been around for a while. It's been around for a couple generations, okay? It's longer. It's been around longer than, some millennials, okay? So Al Gore in the 80s was a senator or Congress. I think he was a senator. He was a pretty conservative guy. And so for all the liberals to come around and think that Al Gore is this this hero for the environment is just, they're kidding themselves. Al Gore's wife is responsible for the the labeling on records and CDs in the 80s. I mean, you still see the parental advisory note on music, even though you're buying an MP3. It still says that, and on Apple Tunes, it'll say it'll put stars in the swear word to make it look like it's not a swear word, and give you a parental advisory and all this bullshit, right? Okay, so his wife's responsible for that. Gary Trudeau himself, the deep blue Dem that he is, was criticizing Al Gore back when he was in Congress, as Prince Albert when he was running for president. Okay, so Al Gore was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. I mean, his dad was in Congress as well. So Al Gore is not the hero that you think he is. Okay, in fact, I consider Al Gore to be the biggest fraud that global warming has on its side. How long ago did his movie come out? About 10 years ago, and they're releasing another one. And what has been accomplished? Honestly, what has been accomplished? We've had a couple world meetings. We've had Paris, during the Obama administration, and I'll get to him in a second. And Al Gore is out there talking, but I'm not seeing any doing. Okay, so what I keep coming back to is this. All these people, they're our leaders. They're saying they're coming out front. They're getting out front on this issue, and yet nothing has been done for 30 years. Okay, it all goes back to we can't afford to do it, or it's just not feasible, or and so lots of knots and lots of political foot dragging. In fact, in California here, we've had something called Zero Emission Vehicle program, the ZEV program, and this started back in 1990. Okay, so we're getting back to the George Bush era. Okay, George H.W. Bush era. Okay, now California was intending to have all zero emission cars by 2000. Okay, and they made it very clear to the auto manufacturers. They had 10 years to do this. But what did California do? Well, in 2000, California stepped away from that, and they basically pushed out and gave in to the corporate overlords, and they gave in to the car companies. And they also did not do anything about supporting the infrastructure that was required to have electric vehicles. Okay, so zero emission vehicles did not have the infrastructure to support them, and yet the California state, the CARB, California Air Board, whatever it's called, was insisting that the industry meet their demands. Okay, so they step back away from that, and the electric car gets canceled by General Motors, and things just keep going as they are. So 17 years later, we're just now starting to see electric vehicles, and they're mostly these rich Silicon Valley dudes driving around San Francisco in their fucking Tesla roadsters, or I don't even see the roadsters that much. I see the sedans, which is basically their environmental gateway to heaven. So they get excused because now they've got a $100,000 electric vehicle that they can drive around and say they're doing something for the environment. Oh, whoop-de-doo. Okay, so California has done nothing. Al Gore has done nothing. And, now we get back into, contemporary times. Okay, so Trump says that, everybody's going after Trump. Everybody's going after Trump about, that he doesn't believe in science, and that he doesn't believe in this, and he doesn't believe in global warming and all that bullshit. And Julie has said on our podcast before that, he paid attention to the scientific reports about erosion and about, global warming affecting sea rise and that kind of thing in Scotland at his one resort. He paid attention to that, and he made adjustments to his resort, to his golf resort, to to meet those requirements, so that it doesn't get destroyed by rising sea levels. Okay, so people are saying that he doesn't believe in this, but he does. He just doesn't care. And I have to say that that's the case with all politicians in this matter. And it doesn't matter what stripe they are. It doesn't matter if they're Democrat or Republican. They just talk a good game, and they don't do a goddamn thing. So the other carrot that I've been seeing a lot, and I've fallen for this, and I've just recently, backed away from it, and that is that the environmental organizations like Greenpeace, Rainforest Action Network, 360.org, they talk a good game, but really, they're basically around asking for money, not to fight global warming and not to do the things that they say they're doing, but to basically stay in business. Okay, these are Soros-funded organizations. Okay, they're there to keep you distracted, to keep you giving money, so that they can funnel it into other campaigns. This whole resist bullshit from Greenpeace is just ridiculous. It should be revolt. Okay, we shouldn't be resisting. We should be revolting. And so I have stopped giving money to Greenpeace, and I'm going to give it to actual and real environmental organizations that are here in the Bay Area, and leave it at that. Okay, there's this great organization called the Marine Mammal Rescue Center or something like that, Marine Mammal Center. Okay, and they are fighting the effects of human intervention and human activity in the oceans on what small population of marine mammals they can, like seals, sea lions, whatever washes up with a net around its neck, or whatever it might be. Okay, so give to your local organizations, the ones you know are actually doing something. Okay, so getting back to 350.org. Sorry, I said 360. I always want to say that because 360. 350.org. Bill McKinben. He's the second biggest fraud around. Okay, so basically, he calls himself an environmental activist, and yet, what does he do? He fucking endorses Hillary Clinton. Okay, he doesn't endorse Jill Stein, the one that actually is in favor of a green economy, the one that is pushing renewable energy, the one that is pushing for a better world in terms of planet and people over profit. Okay, Bill McKinben goes for the candidate that basically is selling fracking around the world. Okay, what the fuck? Okay, so this tells me that these organizations are just part of the quote unquote, and I'm going to say this, it's the nonprofit industrial complex. Okay, they're out there to get your money, to keep you active, and keep you tied to the Democratic Party, because that's who they're part of. Okay, they're part of the liberal side of politics, not the progressives, not the radicals, the liberals, the people who are basically talk a good game and don't do a goddamn thing. Speaking of talking a good game, Obama said he was going to come out and do all these things to make, we've got a little homeless dog activity over here. This homeless guy over here has a few dogs, so sorry for all the squabbling that's going on in the background. Hello, I'm back here. Okay, there we are. So sorry about the noise in the background. Obama, basically, he gets the Nobel Peace Prize before he becomes a president, and then he starts a war, and he starts bombing, more countries than we were bombing before he showed up. And he talked a good game as far as the environment. I mean, he even basically said he was going to create a green economy, and he brought Van Jones in to, the green collar job guy and all this bullshit, and basically they ended up, siphoning off money to the Soros group and to their own, or I'm sorry, the Podesta group and themselves and whoever else was in on it for this whole Cylindra, whatever it was called, that solar company that was the big boondoggle that the Republicans went after him for. Okay, they were trying to put money. They said they were putting money into green technologies for energy and things like that, and it basically was just a fucking siphon of money to their own interests. Okay, it wasn't to help the environment. It wasn't to create green collar jobs. It wasn't to do anything but to make themselves rich. Okay, and Paris was a fucking fiasco. Okay, Paris, nothing was accomplished because the U.S. did not step up and do what they said they were going to do. And everybody, and so all this foot dragging, and some of it, yeah, sure, it's political foot dragging, and it could be even attributed to, bureaucratic foot dragging. But really, when it comes down to it, it's all about making sure that nothing gets happened. And they keep us distracted with this carrot called global warming and climate change. And they keep us voting for them, keeping them in office when they do nothing about it. All right? So, what are you going to do about it? Well, me, I've been an environmentalist for as long as I've been an adult. And I've done everything that you're supposed to do. Even, the silly little recycling, that you do. I mean, I used to take my recycling to the Haight-Ashbury Recycling Center when, the city didn't have a recycling program. I had, a composter in my backyard. I no longer have a backyard, but the city of San Francisco collects compost. Okay, so I do all that. I ride a bike. I take the bus. I don't own a car, okay? But there's a lot of liberal so-called environmentalists out there who have not given up their car. And yet they talk about global warming. And so my challenge to you is, what are you going to do about this? What is it you are going to do about it? No, don't give money to Greenpeace. Don't give money to Bill McKinben. And don't support, the Democratic Party, because they're not going to do a goddamn thing. Bernie Sanders, he barely talked about it, okay? It's part of his platform, but, look at how effective he is, right? He's the most popular politician in the country right now, maybe the world, and yet, he's the lapdog of the Democratic Party, So what is he doing about it? Nothing. What did Al Gore do about it? Nothing. What did Obama do about it? Nothing. Bill Clinton did the opposite of something. He actually reversed the trend, and got to the point, and I'm going back to Clinton because I didn't pay attention to him much, but he actually reversed the trend of people talking about global warming to where it got, completely forgotten, and people got focused on their SUV instead, and making money, it was, the so-called, new economy. Yeah, well, the new economy was basically a boondoggle for the Democratic Party. It turned the Democratic Party into the fucking Republican Party. Okay, so basically Bill Clinton, made us go backward in our awareness of global warming. So my challenge again is, what are you going to do about it? Okay, I'm talking about it, and I've done just about everything I can as a citizen in the infrastructure that we have right now to prevent, my footprint from being higher than it could be. We consume too much. There's too much plastic in the world, and the plastic is made from petroleum, and the petroleum is what's causing this problem. Okay, so we need to do something more. We need to step it up, and we need to start revolting, and not just voting, and not just giving money to these organizations. In fact, stop giving money to Greenpeace. Stop giving money to Rainforest Action Network. Stop giving money to 350. I don't know about the Sierra Club. I really don't know anything. They act like they're part of this whole thing too. So I really don't. I don't give money to them either. So that's my talk for today, my little rant. I hope you do something about this. I hope you have something to say about this. If you don't believe in carbon, that's fine, whatever. But I'll leave you with this. It doesn't matter whether carbon or people are causing global warming. It doesn't matter, because it comes down to this. Your car, the factories that make things, the pollutants that go into the air, the coal-fired power plants, the natural gas-fired power plants, nuclear power plants, all are affecting our planet, especially the ones that belch out pollution, okay? It affects the quality of our air. It affects the quality of our water. And nuclear, well, we've talked about Fukushima. That's another story. These things are all hurting us. They are killing us slowly. So whether it has anything to do with global warming or not, the health effects that it has on the environment and on us, on the creatures that live around us, is immense. So it doesn't really matter. Somebody says election fraud lawsuit. Well, good luck with that one. Anyway, this is J.P. Collins from Book of Hours. Do something about it and get out there and revolt. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you next time. Trolls will be ignored.